Clerk, call the roll, please.
Trustee Anselmo.
Here.
Trustee Berger.
Here.
Trustee Zalick.
Here.
Trustee Giesers.
Aye.
Trustee Frizzaloni.
Here.
Trustee McCarthy.
Here.
Mayor Severino.
Here. Let's see, we got, who's up first here? John Baytek. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, no, I'll introduce him.
John Baytek.
Yes. We've got our fourth and final budget workshop, the best workshop of all, the one where we get to build things. We're number one. Of course, the most fun for me, at least. Anyway, hopefully you guys like all the things that we're building. We are going to start with John, and he's going to kind of give a high-level view of the CIP, and then I'm going to talk about what our assets are and how things break down proportionally. Adam is going to talk about our transportation projects and kind of go into a little more detail on our how we evaluate the roadway system. And Greg is going to talk about the ongoing stormwater projects and what's coming up and how that's working out. And then I'm going to close with some of our facilities projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and I'll run the slideshow here.
Thank you, Bill, and good evening, everyone. Just a quick reminder, the capital improvement program, as we discuss it, essentially encompasses the combined activities of our capital projects fund and our motor fuel tax fund, as a reminder. Thanks. Next slide. On here, on average, we have about $6.2 million per year over the next 5 years to invest in our public infrastructure improvements. Below the table I have on the page there in the colorized area, I've listed the specific dedicated revenue streams that are committed to our capital programming efforts. For the most part, none of these revenues are sources that I would necessarily consider growth items. The majority of these, however, have proven to be reliable and generally stable over the long term. And I do believe I mentioned in a previous workshop that the real estate transfer tax, the one that's kind of bolded in red there in the middle, about 11% of the total, has taken quite a beating during the current year with some of the stress in the real estate market. Just as a reference point, revenues in that category were $1.25 million in each of the last 2 years, and the current year we're barely squeaking by with 400,000 this year. So this will improve over time as the real estate market stabilizes more, but in the short term, I've kind of downgraded this to a negative outlook for the next couple of years at least. At the end of the day, the forecasted revenues are sufficient to pay for and carry us through the next 5-year planning horizon of the capital plan. Next slide. Last thing I have for you this evening is an overall cash flow projection for the next 5 years. And based on the programmed expenditures that the engineering team is going to discuss momentarily, we'll draw down about 70% of those reserves by the end of fiscal 2029. One thing that's not reflected in this model are projected general fund surplus transfers. Those are generally fairly hard to project. But we did, as you remember, begin the current fiscal year with a surplus embedded in our general fund. Just last week, I calculated next year's reserve requirements based on the new budget year as well, and against this year's anticipated general fund surplus. So I do anticipate making a recommendation on the approval of the budget to transfer $2.9 million in surplus funds to the capital projects fund. So that basically boosts your bottom line by that fiscal 29 from 6.5 to roughly $9.5 million mark by fiscal 29. So in a very solid position. The fact that we're drawing, there's a net draw to the fund, is not terribly surprising. We also have a great flexibility in terms of scoping of projects and whatnot. So if things really took a sharp turn for the worse, we always have that at our disposal. So everything in the capital fund is a little bit more long-term and a little bit more flexible in terms of how we approach programming items for that. So it doesn't have the same concerns as I would have on the operating side when we're talking about day-to-day village services. So, that does conclude my remarks. Unless there's questions, I will turn it back to Bill.
Any questions for John? I'm going to kind of keep this interactive. If you have any questions at any time, please speak up.
So John, do you talk to other managers like yourself from other communities about this, like the 1% that he plans on taking?
We do compare notes, absolutely, Mayor. And we've had some discussions with some neighboring towns as well in terms of how we're coming up with our estimates so that we're using a fairly uniform standard for trying to project those losses, so that we're all kind of on the same page, yes.
I mean, for us, it would be 550 to 600,000 we could lose. For Naperville, it could be 3 million.
It very well
I
could
mean,
be,
and
sir,
how do you
yes.
plan a budget when you don't even know what they're gonna take away next? So
It's tough, it is.
stay in touch with them, and if you could, find out how their mares are, because I'm not getting a lot of feel good about this.
Sure. And as we've all probably seen, the governor's article in the Trib today, somewhat disheartening that we should be glad and thanking him for all of the benevolence he's bestowed upon us.
It's amazing
So that it's
what you can tell people and they'll believe.
it's very disturbing, and it makes it sound like their position is fairly hardened in terms of this may become
Just
a
stay on
reality.
it, okay?
Right.
Thank you.
Well, and I actually wanted to just, I was going to bring this up as well, but, because the way that the governor worded his comments, little deceiving, from how I read it. Like, one of the one that jumped out at me the most that really, I think people need to understand is that, he said how much money that the state has put into schools, and therefore, by putting additional money into the schools, municipalities should be cutting the 1% grocery tax. The deception there is that we don't get 1 penny from the money that the schools got. The schools have their own governing board. They regulate the use of that money. And shame on the governor for insinuating that the village of Carroll Stream is getting greedy because we got all this school money, that we should be using our funds better. But there was a couple other things. I'm assuming you read the article? Okay. So the other things that he mentioned, can you just touch on those? Because they don't all apply to every community. And that's kind of how this was written is, you know, every town got all of this money, and that is not necessarily the case. So when we talk about cannabis, gambling, the rebuild, I'm trying to read this real quick, I'm sorry, Rebuild Illinois Capital Plan. So from the things that the governor pointed out, new revenue streams that came to the village, how much did the village of Carroll Stream get out of these?
We certainly have benefited from the Rebuild Illinois Bond Fund, the Transportation Renewal Fund, which extended from the doubling of the gas tax rate. We've seen some benefits from, for sure. Some of that stuff is accurate. The cannabis items are restricted in their use to only cannabis-related activities, and we barely even chipped into some of those revenues at this point. So it's not like we can use that for day-to-day services. I think he commented about video gaming, and certainly every town, every community has a decision to make of whether to allow, permit it, or not permit it. If the state wasn't going to offer anything for the local communities, that was a vessel to help the state. That to me was more of a play for the state's budget, that they're banking on big gambling revenue, and they're receiving a fair share of gambling revenues, and we're getting 5% of the terminal revenues. I'm not exactly sure what the state's getting, probably a third or more of the net terminal revenues as well. So they needed hosts to sponsor those for their own benefit. So to say that was through their own benevolence, you know, it's a bit, yeah, I think it's.
It is, and then, you know, he talks about closing the sales tax loophole with online purchases, and that's great, but we're also we're seeing a decline in brick and mortar retail as well. So what he said is so deceiving, and yeah, if I was a resident, I would read that and go, yay, what is wrong with Carroll Stream? How come we can't get my 1% back on my groceries? And so that's why, from your perspective, taking this 1% away is going to do more harm than good, because the revenues that he's pointing out are not going to make up the $550,000 we're going to lose.
We'd have to make it up somewhere else, and fortunately, we're still in a good position, starting off the new fiscal year, but what does the future lead, right? We've been having some fairly robust times, and we've sat for years, more years than we've sat with the good years, passing a budget and presenting you $2 million in cutbacks 2 months later when the state passes their budget. So we ride the economic cycles, and we try to stay somewhere in the middle so that we're not too cut back, but we don't go and spend lavishly when we're fortunate. We put it away for a rainy day, and when there's a use for it, we apply those, and in this case, the capital fund will need some of those surpluses, and it's going to go right back into the community.
Will we need to adjust our budget once we pass it if this goes through?
Not necessarily at this point. Certainly $550,000, $600,000 is a lot of money, but we're passing this budget with over a $2 million surplus, or just under a $2 million surplus embedded in it. So it takes, if things don't go according to plan, we did miss the mark on sales taxes in our current fiscal year by some measure, and we tried to be a little bit more conservative on our projections for next year. So hopefully that does not come to bear but I think if you recall in the first meeting, I don't see that nice buffer lasting forever. We're eventually going to meet, and then we'll probably be challenged as we were in years past.
Thank you, John.
Okay, and this is a slide, and I like a lot of pie charts here, that shows kind of how our infrastructure is proportioned. And the pink and the red are water and sewer, which we discussed at the last meeting. It's interesting to note that our water is has a value of about twice of what our sanitary sewer does, and that's just because there's hydrants and mains and water towers, and there's a lot more water infrastructure than there is sanitary. But the sanitary is a little bit more caustic, and it can be a little bit more expensive to maintain. But what we're here for tonight is the blue section there, and you can see the bulk of it is the roadway system, and that is all the roads, curbs, sidewalks, bike trails, street signs, anything related to transportation. So it's kind of misleading, roadway. It's really all transportation. And that's been split pretty evenly for the last 20 years between the Capital Projects Fund and Motor Fuel Tax Fund. Motor Fuel Tax is not quite enough to fund everything that we need to do. So we've been also doing that with capital and with grant funding. And then our storm, we've been doing a lot of storm work, which is like the creeks and detention basin, there's a lot of storm facilities, storm sewer under all the roadways, so that's there to maintain. And then finally, facilities, which is all of our buildings, Public Works building, the Village Hall, everything in Town Center, the farmhouse. Those are all facilities that need to be maintained. And when you total them all up, at least, based on what they cost at the time, it's about $500 million, so that's a lot to maintain. And I would say it's probably more than that now when you kind of look at inflation. How our distribution works for the Capital Projects Fund is 2/3 of it is into roadway, and then 1/3 each or 1/6 each, I should say, for the facilities and the stormwater. And that's just based on how much it costs to install. For this upcoming year, you can see that the stormwater is taking a lot of our capital projects fund. And that is because we're doing all these big creek projects. And it's sort of very apparent when you look at down by the wastewater treatment plant and you look in Armstrong Park, that these projects are taking up a good chunk of change for the last few years and for the next couple of years. This year, about half is going into transportation and facilities, just about 18%, which is mostly for Public Works in the final year of their program there to update that. For the 5-year plan, roadway transportation comes back to pretty much the 2/3. And stormwater still takes the bulk of it, but facilities drops significantly off, and I think that's because we've spent a lot of money in our municipal hall remodeling and public works remodeling, and just a lot of the facilities that have taken up a good chunk of the budget over the last few years are finally getting completed now. Based on our grant revenue, and this is all the revenue sources, the reddish colors are operating revenues, which are basically taxes, and the transfer tax, and John discussed all those. And the blue is our grant funding and investment income, which has actually come up because, you're getting pretty good interest rates now. But it's interesting to know that almost 1/3 of our FY25 is in grant funding. So that's pretty significant when you're talking almost a $6 million projects in this upcoming year. The grants come from a lot of different sources. The transportation is just a small portion of it, and I'll get into that later. The ITEP fund is in the blue. Most of it is in stormwater this coming year. We've still got ARPA funding from the county, IEPA funding for the creek. Just the Park District CSPD is for their parking lot up in the Armstrong Park with the permeable paver that they're putting in. And then we just recently got a water quality improvement, which you just approved tonight for $100,000 from the county. And so basically 84% of that grant revenue is for stormwater projects in this coming year. When you look at it in the 5-year plan, we've got over $10 million worth of grants. And only about 1/4 of that is revenue funding. And that's basically money that comes to the village. And 2/3 of it is what I call non-revenue funding. So say, for instance, we build Fullerton Avenue next year. We don't actually get a grant from that. The state bids out Fullerton Avenue for us for $1 million. And then they say, okay, well, you have a $500,000 grant. They give us a bill for $500,000 at the end of the project. And essentially that means that we got a $1 million projects for $500,000. But we never actually see any grant revenue from that because we are not bidding it and we are not paying the contractor ourselves. So that's a little confusing sometimes. So when you consider that, our capital improvement project is actually large. We're getting more value for $46 million, and we're actually getting $56 million worth of assets. Any questions on any of that stuff? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Adam. He's going to talk about roadway here.
All right, rather than jumping right into the future projects, I'm going to talk about a past project, and that is the Pavement Condition Index Study. You may recall that this is a project that is required to be done once every 5 years for us to receive federal grant money like Bill was just talking about. We had $50,000 budgeted to do this project, and we actually found a company called Good Roads, and they were able to do it for $12,000. And the difference between some of the other companies and them was that we actually just, the camera system that they have that has GPS on it was just mailed to us. We put it right on one of our vehicles. And we drove around through town, and it took a couple of days, and we got, basically took pictures every so many feet, and it then analyzed all of the pavements, and it came up with some results here. And I knew this wasn't going to be very clear, but this is basically the full village map results that we received from them. And all I really wanted you to see on this slide was that the green, the darker the green was the better condition rating of the roadway. You can see that there a good portion of the village is nice green colors there, with some yellows and then oranges and then reds were the lowest rated streets there. Go into a little more detail on the next slide here. If you zoom in on that last map that you were just looking at there, you could zoom in on every segment of roadway throughout the village, and you would see basically what we're looking at here. You could see each and every photo that was taken. You could see the pavement condition index of each segment of roadway, so each intersection to intersection of roadway there. And I just took a couple of samples here of roads that were, the first one we're probably all very familiar with, Hiawatha Drive, resurfaced last year, and the average PCI of all of these segments on Hiawatha was around a 95 to 100, again, because it was resurfaced just last year. Thunderbird Trail was last resurfaced in 2012, PCI ranging between 42 and 70. And this is a street that's proposed to be on the 2024 flexible pavement project here. So here is the results of that index study. Actually, this is the average, I'm sorry, this is the posting of every time the index was taken. You could see that through most of the 2000s, we averaged in the mid-80s, about 85 for condition index. And then around 2008, when the economy went down, our roadway projects went down, and you can see it took a toll for a while there. We averaged in the 70s there from 2011, and then our next reading in 2017. And all of those years, we were spending a lot more money doing a lot larger projects to get back to where we were. So now you can see our last reading there is right at 86, and we're right back into the, right at the borderline of very good to the excellent category there. Now this is a condition index deterioration curve for a roadway. The first blue line that kind of settles down and if you were to do nothing on your roadway, this is what your roadway would theoretically do, is go down to fall apart basically at around year 20 to 25. And if you notice that the first 5 to 10 years, the roadways don't deteriorate very fast at all. So at those times, that's where we do this lower cost maintenance type projects to then increase them back up and keep them at high numbers there. So we do small projects and keep the cost down. And then as you get to the year 10, 12, 15, that's when we would start to do the resurfacing type projects. And then if the roads were to get worse and worse, we would go down to 20 years plus, we would do more of a roadway reconstruction. And then 20 years or 30 years plus, we would do more of a recon project. But you see the cost related with that, it varies from just $1, $1.50 a square yard. Resurfacing is up to about, $25 a square yard. And then obviously the reconstruction project is very expensive. So the idea is do smaller projects more often, and we spend less money and keep our roads in better shape. So this is the planned projects for FY25. Just going to go through this real fast. There's a slide for each one of these line items coming up. So, but basically the roadway system, we're expected to spend about $5.3 million, and nearly all of it is going to be out of the capital projects fund this year, with just $100,000 out of the MFT fund this year. We still do have some Rebuild Illinois bond funds to spend, but those are expected to be on their project will start next year. So we'll come up with that in a minute here. So this is a graph on the flexible pavement project. Like I said, we did a lot of projects, big projects in the 2000s and the mid 2000s, 2012 through 17 or so. Because we were catching up from the 2008 economic downfall. But now, our roads have been in much better shape the last few years from this last index. You saw that we were near an 86. The last 4 years, we've spent, paved a lot less roads, basically. So this year coming up, we're expected to do our smallest project yet, and that's only about 60,000 square yards of pavement there. A couple other things I want to show you on this slide is that typical pavement lasts between 12 to 15 years. You'll see the red line on there is 130,000 square yards of pavement. That's 1/12 of all of our pavement. So if we were to do a paving project every 12 years on a roadway, basically, we would be having to spend or use about 130,000 square yards per year. 1/15 would be 104,000 square yards. So there's total is about 1.5, 1.6 million square yards of pavement that we take care of. So the flexible pavement project averages at 107,000 square yards over the last 20 years. So we're right where we belong, right in the averages, right where we should be. So here's the 2024 flexible pavement project. Like I said, there's only 62,000 square yards of pavement. And this actually includes the Coon Road resurfacing project in that pavement calculation as well. Here's some samples of roads that are expected to be surfaced on this year's project. All of them range, PCIs in the 40s and 50s or so, but a couple samples are Thunderbird Trail, as I mentioned earlier, PCI of 42 to 70, Burke Drive, Buffalo Circle, and Osage Circle is all similar PCI ranges. One of the common issues with all of these pavements is the asphalt is starting to settle lower than the curb, and a lot of those, you can maybe see that in these photos here, but I mentioned that deterioration curve earlier. Once you get into a situation where your curb's not draining or the water's not making it to the curb, that's when things start to deteriorate faster, so you get down into that lower end of the deterioration curve if you don't work on these roads soon here. Also, this, like I said, this is going to be included with the flexible pavement project in the same bid. It's the resurfacing of Coon Road from Lies Road to Army Trail Road. $720,000 is the expected cost for that project. I think I forgot to mention the cost for the project too. So a flexible pavement project, $3.2 million is the expected cost, plus the $720,000 for the Coon Road resurfacing. This is just a repeat slide from the past. Really no change here at all. Our crackfill project is always funded out of the motor fuel tax fund at $100,000. This year and each of the next 5 years, we're not expecting any increase in that. Same thing with the preventative maintenance projects. That would be the preservative sealers, restorative sealer, patching project, and pavement marking projects. Same thing, flat rate of $500,000 per year. No change for the next 5 years foreseeably. So this is a project. Construction is more likely going to occur the next year, but this year we're going to start design engineering at $170,000 on the old Gary Avenue reconstruction project. This is going to be a total reconstruction at Gary Avenue, plus either a rehabilitation or reconstruction of the culvert at the north end of the roadway there. This project, when it does go to construction, will be funded. Any remaining Rebuild Illinois bond funds will be expended on this project, and then the remainder is expected to be out of the MFT fund. And all the Rebuild Illinois bond funds need to be obligated by July 1st of 2025. So later on this year, when I know the closeout of the other Rebuild Illinois bond fund projects and their final dollar amounts, I will do a resolution to appropriate those funds, so we'll have that ready to go. And then later on, when we have a good idea on the engineering costs for the full project, we'll do a MFT appropriation for the remaining funds at that time. And this is the Fullerton Avenue LAFO project this year. Design engineering is underway right now on this project. Total cost for that would be $150,000, and that's funded out of the Capital Projects Fund. And this is a $1.5 million estimated project, half federal grant and half village costs. So total cost of this project is expected to be about $950,000, and that's about 56% of the total cost. And this project here, you probably heard recently that we've adjusted the scope of this project. We've removed the bike path on Schmale Road. We're just running into all kinds of issues with right-of-way acquisition. The cost of that and the time involved in that was gonna take years to acquire all of the right-of-way that we needed and the temporary easements. So we've omitted the Schmale Road portion of that project. The remainder of the project will continue. All of the values on this page here are kind of obsolete at this point. Basically, the bottom line is that the scope of the project's gonna lessen, the grant funding is gonna lessen because the scope is lessening, but the local match, when all said and done, will likely be less than what's posted on here now. And our budget is actually updated somewhat to reflect lower numbers already for this project. Design engineer is underway right now. There is still easement acquisition on a couple of the other areas that we are working on right now, so this project is expected to go to construction next year. Klein Creek Trail, this is a stormwater type project, so Greg will talk about this.
Okay. So Klein Creek Trail, most of it is done, so I'm just going to give a brief recap of what we've done before we talk about what we want to budget for next year. So first off was the extension to Coon Road, and that was in our 2016 comprehensive plan. As part of that, then we built a pedestrian crosswalk across Coon Road, so it connects with the Stephen Revenessi Trail and the Great Western. We then did an extension to Thunderbird Trail because of some of the retaining wall that we had to put in that section. We kind of leaned into that and put a kind of a river walk feature. So you can see that's the connection right through Memorial Park, right after the Park District cleaned up their portion, which I think they did a great job of. And then on top of the wall, the upstream and downstream end, that's kind of the quote-unquote river walk that I'm talking about. We then resurfaced the existing trail that was there, so it's all brand new. So for this fiscal year, asking for $130,000. That's going to go towards installing the bridge. The bridge was delivered last week, and Public Works helped us offload that. It's stored at the Water Reclamation Center. And then I'm putting together the contract for that, so you'll see that come through while we'll be bidding it, and then hopefully have that come through for approval very soon. And then you can see on the pictures on the right, next to the railing, there's still some landscaping work to do, so the 130 would cover that as well. So that is Klein Creek.
All right, so back to the future transportation projects. Flexible pavement project is, again, an annual project, and it varies between the MFT fund and the Capital Projects Fund. No real change in it over the next few years, roughly 3.5 million, it's about 3.8 to 4 million per year expected. The preventative maintenance projects, like I mentioned earlier, $500,000 expected each of the next few years. And I also said Fullerton Avenue, LAFO will go to construction in FY26, so $900,000 of our funds is expected to be expended there. Southeast Bike Path would go to construction FY26 as well at $522,000 out of the Capital Projects Fund. And then the old Gary Avenue reconstruction would be in construction in FY26. The combination of the, again, the MFT and the remainder of the Rebuild Illinois bond funds for that year. The Lies Road, LAFO and Lies Road, LAFO and trail paving from Coon to Gary is expected to be in its design engineering phase in FY26. And the St. Charles Road sidewalk project from Gary Avenue to President Street would start its design engineering in FY '27. I'm sorry, FY '26, and then construction in FY '27. And then no, I'm sorry about it, I'm missing my numbers here. The sidewalk project, design engineering in FY '27, construction in FY '28. And then the Morton Road recon, and that would also be a new bike trail from Lies Road up to about North Avenue, would be in design engineering in FY '28 and construction in FY '29. And then there's a street light replacement program for the Lies Road lights between Gary Avenue and Schmel Road, at about $460,000 FY '28. Roughly every year, you know, it's varying from about $7.5 million in FY '26 because we're expending a lot of the grant funds, the remainder of the Rebuild Illinois bond funds, and then from there on, down to $6 million, $5.5 million, and $5.5 million again. Any questions related to transportation?
The Coon Road project that we're calling off the bike path, have we committed to anybody or given any money? Have we already, were they bid and we paid them, or were?
For the Coon Road paving project?
Schmale, I'm sorry.
Oh, the Schmal project, have we bid anything yet? No. We do have design engineering contracts underway right now. Easement acquisition contract is underway right now. Some funds have been expended at this point for, the initial offers were made for the easement acquisitions. They will likely be rescinded here in the near future. So there's some funds already expended on that, but not the full amount of what would be if.
That would be expected, but I was more concerned, did we write somebody a check? Then the neighbor said no.
No,
We
no,
were really-
none of that, no. So you're saying, did we obtain an easement that we're not gonna use?
Yeah.
No, we did not, no.
Because we could put a sign there that says, your neighbor didn't want this, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions?
Okay. Good evening. Thanks for this opportunity to explain what we hope to do next year for stormwater. So I'll briefly go through these. We got slides, but the first two are an annual program. This one is substantially completed. We are under construction now with this one, and because of the good weather, we are making some pretty good progress. So a lot of this is actually going to be expended in this fiscal year. A lot of that is also funded by IPA and ARPA and Water Quality Improvement Program grant that we just got. These two, I don't have slides on. They're based on design. So if you have any questions about those, let me know. Section 2, to remind you, that's the section between Illini and Thunderbird Trail. And then Section 4 is from Seminole, where it connects with Klein Creek, to Gary Avenue. So those are the last two major sections. And then I'll talk about what I call real-time control, and asking for a pilot study on that one. So starting off with the first annual program, so most of this is fixing roadway drainage structures that are failing, and it's too much work for Public Works to do, so we lump them all together into one contract and then get it done. But we also do what's called underdrain, and that's what I focused on in this slide presentation. So first, we go out and map and monitor any locations that we are told about icing or have seen ourselves. So we put that into GIS. We then take pictures over the winter period because, the conditions change. Then what we'll do is map the sump pumps, because it's basically the sump pumps that are causing these issues. Once we know that, then we can design and construct the underdrain. And, this was an example of something that we did last year. And then this is an email that we got from a resident that says, thank you, we clear driveway and apron and no Sand Creek Drive skating rink. So this is what we get to accomplish with the underdrain, and very satisfying every year. Helps out Public Works too, less plowing and icing and whatnot. So we'll continue doing that. The other annual program is public detention basin rehabilitations. So just for example, this is one that we already did and I talked about last year, but that's the Park Unit 4, so that one was failing really bad. We need to get that one done right away. We then have a whole bunch, let's see, five or six, that we talked about with Public Works and said, hey, which ones do you guys have trouble with, and would like us to rehabilitate. So that's this list, and, we're gonna hit them, one or two at a time every year. And it's gonna kind of link into the real-time control I'll talk about later. So this one was substantially completed, section 1. 360 this year for some remaining items, but this is a aerial view from Coon Road looking back upstream. And that, you can see kind of the meanders that we put into the, the creek as opposed to the straight section. Here's what we did with the wastewater treatment outfall. Kind of made that a little bit more natural feature. This is the Easton Park outfall that was, highly eroded, and so we made that also kind of a waterfall feature. And then this is the view from Thunderbird Trail and, Memorial Park, if you remember. It was heavily eroded and kind of an eyesore. So hopefully that starts getting better over the next couple of years. To give you some perspective, so when we carved out all those wetlands and dirt and made that big old pile by McNeese Drive, we did gain something out of that, which is 2.7 million gallons of additional flood storage. So to give you some perspective, that's about 7% of the entire Armstrong Park complex, the big and the lower basins. So not too shabby. So that 360 is going to help us remove the bridge, because that removal is actually under this contract. Supplemental plugs, so those are the seedlings that we just add into instead of seed. Year 2 of the typical native plant establishment out of 3. And then we'll seed that stockpile at McNeese Drive. Questions? All right, so section 3, which is what we're doing right now. So that's, close to 2.8 million. That was a view from the library pedestrian bridge, before the clearing. And this is a view from last week.
Yes.
Many times.
Yeah, many times. I'm sorry to hear. It's the hardest part of the project, for sure, because it looks the worst right afterwards. But hopefully they will, appreciate the final product. Obviously, this interim picture is not all that great, but, it's showing the progress that we've already made, basically, is the point. So to recap what we're doing, we've got 3 proposed wetlands that we're creating. There's some retaining wall that we need to do. A proposed path is going to replace the path that we took out from the western side of Mitchell Lakes. It's going to cross over and connect with the existing path. So you'll still have that loop around Mitchell Lakes, And what we're doing is we're getting rid of that little sidewalk path, if you're aware of, against the Lake Haven apartments. It just wasn't really feasible to get that to connect in, so just bringing everybody to the west side of the creek. So those wetlands provide us floodplain storage, just like in that section 1. So to give you another perspective, that's like building another half of that lower basin, so 1.5 million gallons. So then we take all that dirt, and we're building up the sled hill. Park District's very happy about that. And then, and saves us some money, right? We don't have to, I'm sorry. Same place, right south of Kids World. So it's going to go up about 10 feet, and it's going to look like the Wheaton North. We modeled it off of the Wheaton North one, if you've been there. And then the permeable parking lot, we're using that for staging. And then, as part of that, we've just incorporated their permeable parking lot contract into ours. So as soon as the contract's done using that area, they can, immediately construct that and get that done.
Reshare this part of it on social media. We've got a number of people commenting on it saying we killed all the trees and killed all the bushes. Maybe if
All the vegetation and,
we just repost it and say, this is why we're doing it.
and I guess then my question is, how how many years before we start to see the vegetation growing back? So how long do the residents who are unhappy with their view right now have to wait? And we did, trust us, we all explained to the people who were asking us, I mean, this was invasive things that we needed to get out of there. I mean, this is, ultimately, this is a great thing. It's a little ugly right now, but, you know, great things are coming because we had to do what we were doing. But how long is their view going to be ugly?
Yeah, so as long as the weather stays like this, we'll have, you know, seed in the ground and plugs planted as early as the spring, so May and June. So by the end of the summer, you'll see some green.
The ground coverage at least.
Yeah,
Start to take effect.
yeah, and there's some natives that come out early, you know, that will make it look good.
Are you complaining about the trees that came down?
Everything.
Everything.
The ones that the wires from the electric would
Yeah.
always fall on, and
Yeah,
then they
there's
would
that.
have no power?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, now
But
we missed the
basically, you
trees.
can see from
Can't make them all happy.
the view from the library's patio is dirt, and we took out.
I know when I drive by. These pictures are worth thousands of dollars.
They
what
are,
you've done.
it's,
Oh, that's
The
beautiful.
sad part is that people that live there will probably never see some of what you did at the other end of town and what you did through the middle of town. So, wonderful job.
Yeah,
You
I
can
see a lot of
even look-
people, I'm sorry.
You can even look at the, from the water, from Thunderbird to Coon Road, from what it was about this time
Right.
last year
right.
to what it's going to look like this summer. No, the trees aren't going to be full.
Right.
That's going to take years, but it's night and day.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, yeah.
And you did mention you're working with the DuPage Organic Garden Club to create some of the plugs.
Yeah, to hopefully get that greening faster, so they're helping, you know, grow a bunch of seedlings, and then they'll plant them on
Yeah,
the
people are
project.
growing in their homes to get it ready.
Yeah, yeah, so,
That's,
save some money and create some, you know, interest in the project. So, of the, that total construction contracts, just to remind you that, you know, 22% came from the IEPA, 33% came from DuPage County's ARPA, another 4% from that recent water quality grant program, and that leaves us with around 41% of our cost. So, and 100% is, you know, the Park District is picking up on their permeable parking lot. Yeah, I did want to say that, you know, I meet people out there on the path, and they mention their concerns. And I always tell them, well, go look at section one. Have you seen section one? And nobody ever has seen section one, you know? And I said, well, I'll try to walk down there at some
What
point.
you gotta do is go by the old Veterans Memorial and take a look at what you've done.
Yeah, yeah.
Worth-
So
Can't put a price tag on that.
just continue to talk to people, and they'll be happy eventually. All right, I'm going to be a little bit longer on this one. It's a little bit of a pet project of mine, and so I got to explain a little bit. So I'm asking for 150. What I got last year was a grant from the Army Corps of Engineers, which is, you know, $125,000 of their time to do some computer modeling. So this picture that I'm showing right here is the state of the model that they've done right now. So to give you some perspective on, you know, how much, you know, how broad it is, you know, it's to Windsor Park and North Avenue at the bottom, all the way up to Stratford Square, right, Mall. So that's a decent size. And so within that model, it's going to eventually include over 50 detention basins, 5 miles of Klein Creek. It's going to have over a mile of storm sewers in the model, and it's going to have both of those DuPage County reservoirs. So what are we doing with this model? Well, no matter how much we've done with stormwater over the decades, which is a phenomenal amount, we still have flooding, unfortunately. It's just you know, the unfortunate reality. And those large projects are complete, and there's not a lot of room anymore for more large projects like that. So what we want to do, what I want to investigate is the existing infrastructure we do have, can we use technology to make it more efficient? And the analogy I like to use, and hopefully you can follow along, but when I drive Army Trail Road every day to come in, the lights are timed in a way that You know, I can progress through and I don't have to stop much. Now, that wasn't always the case. If you remember driving in you know, east of Gary, and it can be a nightmare. And so there's two things you can do. You can either add another lane to help you, you know, get more traffic, or you could time the lights to be efficient. And so that's the difference with the detention basins that we have that are kind of, you know, are not smart, they're just kind of dummy. If we were to add another lane, we'd have to find another place to dig, you know, an entire new reservoir. And I'm saying we don't have that. So we don't have the room, like Army Trail doesn't have the room to add another lane. So we've got to make ours smarter, like our traffic signals. And with the forecast that can come out today, you can get pretty good forecasts. Run the computer model and say, okay, if this rain comes in 6 hours, what should we do with the detention basin? Should we close this one? Should we open this one? Get them to work together, and that'll just, you know, be a lot more efficient than just doing the same thing no matter what storm comes at you. It's like putting the pots and pans setting on your dishwasher every time, even though you only have like a few dishes in there. And so it's overkill, and we can be better about it. So that's what I'm hoping to do with this study. This is going to tell us then, with that money, I'd reach out to a third-party engineering that does this work, and they're going to take a look at past rain events. They'll optimize, you know, how that release works. In the study that I did for the Kimberly Fullerton, if you guys remember last year, was the one over here by the railroad tracks. We found that you don't have to do this on every single detention pond. There are, you know, a handful of critical ones that you can do this on and make a significant amount of impact. And then the rest are just kind of diminishing returns. So that's what they'll do is they'll identify those critical ponds. And then what I'd like to do is do a pilot test on one of those critical ponds. So what does that mean? Well, you take a plate that has a hole in it. That's what the detention pond works on right now. Take that plate off. We put in a valve, the same kind of valve that we use on our water distribution system. And then you can have an actuator that can open and close it remotely. And then it's tied into the third party's proprietary system. So they look at the forecast and then the computer model, and they say, okay, this detention pond has to have it open a certain percentage to maximize its use. So basically, trying to get rid of that point where we're driving on Klein Creek, it's super flooded, then you go up to the industrial area and all these detention ponds are empty. It's kind of frustrating, right? So that's what I'm hoping to.
So we're going from dumb TVs to smart TVs.
TVs, yes,
Got it.
but not as entertaining.
Well, it will be.
Wow.
If there's no standing water on the roadway, it's very entertaining.
Hopefully. All right, so looking into the future, just remember, these two are just annual programs that continue on. Section 1 eventually gets completed with its native vegetation maintenance and goes into operating. Same thing happens with Section 3. Sections 2 and 4 are, going to be designed this year. So then the idea will be to decide which one we want to do first. And I think that might depend on public input, as we're going to have to do, for Section 2 at least. Well, both of them. Both of them are through people's backyards. You're well aware. So we'll be having to talk about it.
Well aware, I've been hearing from my brother for a couple of years now.
Right, so.
It's his turn, right?
When's it his turn? So, depending on the complexity and the feedback, maybe we will want to swap these, but we'll be ready to go with either one. I'm going to continue applying for grants from the IEPA. Just to let you know, the DRCW and the ARPA funds have all dried up, so those are not available anymore. Kehoe Boulevard, Section 2, that's, the first one was in front of AJ Antunes. Section 2 just covers all the way up to Gurzewski. From there, it turns into storm sewer and you can't do much. That's, it doesn't look good. There's some spots that are kind of bad, but certainly not critical. And so we push that into the, far ends there just so we can pay attention to it. So then the real-time control, if things go well with the first First one, then we would continue adding to critical ponds on a slow basis. I think, though, that we might be able to get some pretty good funding if it does work and want to do it faster. I think we could reach out to, FEMA or some other sources that might help us accelerate that program. So then the Southeast Stormwater Study, just to remind you what that is, that's the Winfield Creek watershed. So that's the Schmale Road area. That's where we have flooding at Main and Gunderson often, where the Home Depot parking lot floods. Winfield Creek goes through Community Park, so that's what those lagoons are. So that also struggles to have any opportunity to do a big, large reservoir. There's just no space. So I think that's where the real-time control will come in to play even, more importantly in that watershed, because we just have to make what's there more efficient. Otherwise, there's not many options, at least cost-effective options. So the final thing that we have here is, we did a condition assessment on the sanitary sewer system, but the storm sewer system is also, pretty old in some spots. And, there's been some failures that, Public Works has had to go on in and do some emergency repairs. So it would be ideal if we could do a similar condition assessment like we did with Red Zone, where we did the entire system. We know where our problems are, and we go after those right away. So that's too big for Public Works to do in-house. So what we're programming here is to do another contract, kind of like the Red Zone, where it then gets, payment program over 5 years. So that's what that is. We can talk about that next year, though. And that's it for stormwater. Thank you.
Any questions for Greg?
No, thank you for your enthusiasm.
So I have a question. That 56 acres of land that we own at Community Park, no one seems to want it. Could we ever maybe pass that off, or have stormwater maybe dig that out and get rid of it and hold water?
I was working on a memo today. Applied for a grant to get some trees planted. So Public Works and the Park District will plant these trees. I think we have a pretty good chance of getting the grant. And then in the
Trees, I want to get them out of there.
oh, these are nice native trees.
56 acres of land.
Well, let me preface this by saying the Forest Preserve District, their main goal is to save land from development. And unfortunately, this being in our control means that it's never going to be developed, right? So it's not a priority to them because there's nothing to save. And then because of that, it's also been, neglected, and there's a lot of invasives there. So if they were to take it on, it would also be a tremendous burden to them for maintenance. So they're just not interested at this stage.
Well, that's it. It's over with. It's
No.
going to stay like that forever.
No, that's what we're doing is with the native vegetation program that we have, we're chipping away at that. So we're gonna start clearing.
Dig down and make, like he was saying,
I mean, it
make a
makes-
detention area.
We just set
There?
up a block from there. They're flooding in the parking lots.
Yeah,
I mean,
Right.
could we make that? We tried to give that to the Forest Preserve.
right,
I sat with the Forest Preserve boss. He
Yeah.
said you could have it.
right,
He laughed.
yes.
He didn't want it.
No, thank you, yeah, that's what
I
they
mean,
said.
we're stuck with it. I mean,
For now,
we've used some of it to the Park District. It looks nice, but there's a lot of property that's just sitting there empty that probably could be used for something.
yeah. So it's already floodplain, most of it. So it's already acting as storage. So there's not much more we can carve out of it. But believe me, I have looked at that, as something that's, if we could do it, that'd be great. But, it's kind of while the Forest Preserve District doesn't think it's very nice, DuPage County staff themselves look at it as a wetland in the natural area, and to dig all that up and,
Keep that thought. I like that.
they're not gonna like it, but yeah. Hopefully that answers your question, yeah. But, okay, thank you.
I've also heard that, they didn't like it because it's so unkept and the paths were in bad shape and, there's a lot of invasives in there and it just doesn't really, it isn't attractive to them.
Bill, it was free. They buy land for millions of dollars and then go back in and do that. We wanted to give it to
But
them.
they were afraid they'd have to spend a bunch of money in there, and they didn't.
There was no rush. I made that real clear to them. Just take it off our hands. So, okay.
Well, anyway, yeah, we're still working towards that and trying to enhance the look of that whole park and that area. So we're gonna keep working on that, chipping away at it. Maybe someday, maybe, you know, a different regime in there, and who knows? So facilities projects, we're getting pretty low on. This is the end of it. It's the end of the Public Works projects. It's, I believe, the third year. And this is what was in the plan. This is actually a slide from last year. If you guys have any questions on this stuff, the gentleman right here is gonna answer it for you. This is kind of a photo.
Oh, my God. I'm gonna move in there myself.
No more money.
And this is pretty much the end of our big facility projects, so that's why it's such a small piece of the pie in the 5-year plan, because we've done quite a bit in the last 5 years, so. You know, it's just the ebbs and flows of assets, and now how they deteriorate. Sometimes some need more, sometimes they need less. Looking at, the town center electrical, and so, the first picture is the vault, and that's where you get in to, put in, reset the circuits. The second picture there is down underground, which is a confined space entry now, which it wasn't when it was first constructed, or at least I was down there, and I didn't have any, safety gear or anything on, so, it was a little different era when that was first built. So we're gonna take a look at that and see this year, just in the analysis and design, where the power is. Maybe those pictures on the right are on the west side of the town center, and there's a completely separate ComEd feed for that. And you can see the ComEd box where I think there's a family of raccoons living in there right now. And then that's our green boxes, and that's just for the lighting and the parking lots that was constructed at a later date than the original fountain and concession building. And then we've budgeted $800,000 just based on the Man-Hard study. And, we're gonna take a look at that after we see, what comes out of the analysis and design. And then finally, we, threw in $150,000, and we've heard that there are welcome signs that need to be more welcoming, so that's.
A lot. Yeah, we'll also look to see what might be able to be condensed. We may not replace them all. We want to get the ones that are more, that grab more attention. Major entryways.
If you haven't noticed, our neighbor from the south, they've got that big building next to where John and Tony's used to be. Little Winfield sign right there, a nice one. So I would think we want to put one in front of where John and Tony's was, a nice one, saying we're in Carroll Stream. They have one building. They make it sound like it's all theirs, and that's false. So, not happy with that at all.
No.
And that is the end of the presentation. Any questions?
One, I'll say first, and I'm sure that everybody will feel the same way, outstanding job by all the staff. Thank you all.
Well, thank you for supporting us.
You all sucked it up and let Brad spend all the money this last year.
Yeah. Yeah, Brad, you're
You know
done.
what? It's worth it. I mean, those guys need a good place when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and it's below zero and they're fixing pipes. They need a place to go back to and enjoy that atmosphere, so.
And trucks that run and spread salt and,
Good job, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Special thanks to Adam and Greg for all
Yes.
they do. I mean, they really run these projects, so. And then this is kind of our next steps, and it looks, like basically the budget is going to be early this year. So
John, are you gonna go on vacation? You're gonna have all that extra time?
We'll call them something for you.
Yeah.
He's planning his trips. He's planning the trips right now, don't let him fool you.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Don't give the extra if we need to take $550,000, Brad, you know we're gonna look at you first. Just blame the
That
governor.
wasn't a question, that was a statement.
Yeah, blame the governor.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved. Oh, I'll second.
First, second, whichever.
Okay, moved by trustee McCarthy, seconded by trustee Zalek, or reverse, whatever you want. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Anselmo.
Aye.
Trustee Berger.
Aye.
Trustee Zalek.
Me, aye.
Trustee Giesers.
Aye.
Trustee Frizzaloni.
Aye.
Trustee McCarthy.
Aye.
Meeting